I am very excited about this next session. When the quick little background, John Lanier, who you'll meet later, I had a conversation with him and I said, faith is so integrated into who we are as the Boy Scouts of America. And the 12th point of the Scout Law is a Scout is reverent. And I have done, as a Scout volunteer, so many Scouts-owned services and different things where we try to find something that's common ground that doesn't offend other faiths. And we typically go to things of American Indian lore or an Indian prayer and find things that are non-offensive to others, but we can all rally around. And the realization that the love for our environment and God's creation is something that we all share in multiple faiths. And I went to John, who's my friend, and I said, who can I talk to about creation care? I was all excited about this as faith is very important to me, and as it is to most of us in this room, and had the conversation. He says, well, I would start with Matthew and Nancy Sleeth. And so that began with a conversation, and the typical business dealings where you call somebody up and set a meeting was not the way we did it. They invited me to their house. They prepared a meal. We sat and shared our hearts and vision, and Matthew said, I would love to come participate at your summit in 2016. I said, no, that's not 2016. We need 2014. He goes, well, 2015 is already booked. I said, no, 2014. And he says, but I'm in Canada during this period of time. And then had a phone call a day later, said, we can make it work if possible. And so I know there's personal sacrifices to be here. But I also believe in my heart that, and the why I'm excited, and I never really told Mary Ann this, is, though we have such an opportunity in the scouting movement to introduce youth to the outdoors. And it's one thing to fall in love with the sky and the trees and the earth, and it's a big part of our sustainability part of it. But for when a youth connects that to our Creator and whatever their faith is, that is life-changing, and that is something that will never leave them. And so I asked Dr. Sleeth to come join us. And I am excited about this next session, and then I'm excited that Rabbi Hyman has joined us to lead the conversation afterwards. So let me give the official bio. Dr. Matthew Sleeth is an author, speaker, and advocate of creation care, an environmental movement in which biblical mandates concerning humanity's role as stewards of the environment, or creation, is emphasized. A former emergency room physician, Sleeth wrote his first book, Serve God, Save the Planet, in 2006. Since then, he has spoken more than 900 times in churches, schools, and to media outlets about the biblical mandate to care for the earth. I'm going to reread that. About the biblical mandate to care for the earth. In 2008, Sleeth wrote the introduction to the Green Bible, and in 2010 wrote The Gospel According to the Earth, Why the Good Book is a Green Book. His third book, 24/6, A Prescription for Healthier, Happier Life, was released in 2012. Side note, that's the one I'm doing with our young couples in our church, and I would encourage everybody to read that one as well. It's fantastic about the Sabbath. But a Prescription for Healthier, Happier Life was released in 2012. Through his nonprofit, Blessed Earth, and you can go there to blessedearth.org to learn about the organization, Sleeth wrote and released a 12-part creation care DVD series called Serving God, Saving the Planet, with accompanying guidebooks in 2010. So please join me in my enthusiastic welcome for Dr. Matthew Sleeth.
Thank you. Hi. I am not a doctor of biology or anything. I actually am a medical doctor by training. And I've tried to get away without giving you the following piece of information, and I always have to. The number one question I get asked is, do you still practice medicine? And I run an organization and speak constantly and write. There's no time to practice medicine, but I really miss practicing medicine. And I practiced emergency medicine, and I loved it. I still dream about it all the time. So if any time during my talk you want to drop dead, it'll make me really, really happy. Because I'll stop what I'm doing and try to resuscitate you. It's great actually until somebody actually goes down, and I've had it happen once. And people in this very crowded auditorium thought it was faked to begin with, and then they realized it wasn't. It turned out that the person wasn't dead. It was more of a swoon. But when I came back up, it was like walking on water. So feel free to go to ground, as we say. I have one of the most interesting jobs in this country, and that is that I'm a Christian, and I'm constantly trying to connect Christians with care of the environment, care of creation, and doing that by connecting them with what the Bible has to say. And that's a really interesting job. And all kinds of speaking and teaching opportunities have been open to me over time. And you might ask, well, what are the qualifications for this job? I speak frequently in seminaries, and as a matter of fact, our organization has a coalition of seminaries, about 40 of them now, but I've never been to seminary. So, what qualifies me? Well, I'm going to tell you my journey, just like we heard the journey last night of getting to the North and the South Pole, and this is a spiritual journey. And in some ways, a road map was missing for me as well. But I grew up in a rural area that was dairy farming country, and loved being outdoors, and spent enormous amount of time outside. And went to school, that sort of thing, went to church as a kid, stopped going as a teenager when my family experienced some hard times, and came out of high school as a carpenter. And I built houses and remodeled houses for a number of years. Nothing special there. And life took an interesting turn for me when I was working on the home of a family that was in the DC suburbs. And the father of this home was a periodontal surgeon. They were Jewish. They had 4 children, a son and 3 daughters. And the moment that their 18-year-old daughter walked into the room and I saw her for the first time, their worst nightmare began to unfold. That's my wife, Nancy, who's with me today. It's difficult to tell you exactly how not happy they were with the situation of Nancy and I falling in love and deciding to get married. That they weren't happy would be to put it mildly. Nonetheless, Nancy was committed to throwing her life away on this bum, and she married me. And then I had a problem, because it really was not a good family situation to come into and to live out life in. If you are marrying into a family like this, and you cannot be born the same faith, there is only one way that I could think of to finally win my mother-in-law over. I went to medical school. That's what I wanted to do. I had been a terrible student in high school, and no undergraduate school would take me, and an uncle of mine did me one of the greatest favors anyone has ever done me. He got me into school here in this state, in West Virginia, and I went to West Virginia University, and he said, "I'll get you a semester and the rest is up to you." So I started school with a terrible record in the past. I'd flunked the 10th grade completely. And yet I was accepted to both schools here in this state, medical schools, as well as others after 2.5 years with no undergraduate degree. The room always gets quiet when I say that. I don't know of any way to duplicate this other than to marry Nancy. I got her, she's mine, you can't have her. So you'll have to get into med school the old-fashioned way. So I went to medical school and studied very hard, and we had 2 children. And my worldview was not religious at all. I had rejected that, and my worldview was secular. It was scientific. It was rational thinking, and that's how I viewed the world. And my religion really was getting ahead. And we had 2 children, and we built this beautiful house on the coast of Maine, and life was about getting ahead. We didn't have much religion. I guess my children had all holidays. They didn't have religion. At Christmas time, the fiddler on the roof would slide down the chimney. If he saw his shadow, he'd leave Hanukkah candy, and there'd be 6 more weeks of Christmas. Anyways, and that's the kind of mishmash that we had. Was I concerned about the environment? That's what this conference is about. Yes, I was concerned about the environment, but I was really concerned about my career and that sort of thing. We went on vacation in February, left the coast of Maine, and went and stayed on an island in the Gulf of Mexico. It was snowing, it was cold. Has anybody here been to Maine? Raise your hand. Now, keep it up if you were there in the winter. You skied or were in the military? Yeah. It's very cold, and so we escaped that, and we took our children, and we went and we stayed on this island. And this island is really truly an island. There isn't a road to it. There isn't a causeway. You have to take a boat to get there. There are no roads on the island. All the lights get shut off at night. It's a beautiful place. And I wanted my children to get worn out during the day because I'd been working a lot and I hadn't had time alone with Mrs. Sleeth. And so I very much looked forward to wearing my kids out and having them go to bed early. And to help ensure with that, I had them play outside in the sun all day, and they got paid $1 for every gecko that they could catch. And I had to pay up money. And dinner time came, and we fed them a huge dinner. And then bedtime came, and we read them a story, and then we read them another story, and then we read them another story, and they wouldn't go to sleep. And my frustration level began to grow. All frustration in the world is the gap between your expectations and reality. And the gap seemed to be growing to me. And as this frustration grew, I finally decided to take matters in my own hand, and I gave the kids Dimetap. Never do this. I'm a doctor, though it was legal, and never give more than 10 milligrams per kilogram if you do it. And so I gave them Dimetap, and off they went to sleep. And Nancy and I were sitting out on this balcony, and the wind was blowing at night. There's no more beguiling sound, I don't think, than the wind rustling a palm tree at night. And the Milky Way was spread out over us, and the air was so clear from blowing all across the Gulf of Mexico. And we just kind of sat there just soaking up the beauty and the quiet and the rustling leaves and the wind. And Nancy turned to me and asked me a question that was really going to change my life. She said to me, "Matthew, what do you think the biggest problem in the world is?" And I thought for a moment, and if we were to pass around a piece of paper and everyone were to put their thoughts of what that might be, there are many things I think we could say would be legitimate. There's still 40,000 nuclear warheads on this planet, and some people threatening to use them. There's great disparity between the rich and the poor, and that seems to be growing greater around the world. There's greed. There's something over 100 declared official wars going on in the world. What I said to her is that the world is dying. I didn't say this because I'm a biologist per se or an environmentalist. I said that based upon changes that I have seen and that have happened in my lifetime. In my lifetime, I recall seeing the last stand of chestnut trees near my home come down. There aren't any chestnuts on Chestnut Street. There aren't elms on Elm Street. There aren't caribou in Caribou, Maine. The blue pike, the most numerous fish to ever be taken out of the Great Lakes, went extinct in my life after I graduated from high school. I live in Kentucky now, and there's a historical estate that Henry Clay lived on that's near us called Ashland. It's named after the ash trees, and every single ash tree is dead or dying at the moment. So we're not talking about things in remote history, and we're not talking about rare species. As I look around, the world was dying. That's what I told her. World's dying. Answer to your question. Well, she had a follow-up question. She said, what are you going to do about it? We're on vacation, folks. And I thought for a second, and I poured her a big Dimetap. And I didn't have an answer. What am I going to do about it? And we came back to our life, and our life was great. I loved my work as an ER doc, and it was something I was really good at. And we went about that life, and that question, what are we going to do about a world that's dying, began to eat at me. And I didn't know what to do. And a number of things began to happen in our lives and around us that were impossible to escape, really. One of the things was that my wife's only brother drowned in front of my children. I had a patient who, over a number of years, had become obsessed with me. I'd resuscitated him from overdoses. He named a grunge rock band after me, and then he began to stalk me. And it's a scary thing to have to leave your home at night to go to work and know that there's somebody that might intend you harm. And he did one scary thing, and the police went and checked and found his mother in the closet where he had locked her in after he'd killed her a week before and been sprinkling her with carpet freshener. And probably the last thing that I'll talk about in public that occurred and happened was that one Tuesday morning on a beautiful day, I got home from working that night in the emergency department, and our next door neighbor called. She had a son, my son's age, and they'd kind of grown up together. And she said, can you come and help me tell Jamie that his dad was in the first plane to hit the World Trade Center an hour and a half ago. And when I added all of this that was going on to a world that was dying, I was not a pleasant person to be around. My heart was heavy, and I wanted to know what to do, and I frankly wanted some reason to go on. I'd also woken up to bad things in the emergency department. For whatever reason, up to that point, things had kind of rolled off my back. And I'll tell you just one medical thing that also began to worry me. I had 3 women come through the department one week, and all of them were in their 30s, and all 3 of them had breast cancer, and all 3 of them are dead. And especially one who began seizing on me in the department really affected me, because I had to go over and tell her dad, with a kid on a hip and one holding by the hand, that he was on his own. Mom had died. So all this kind of weighed on me, and I wanted to know what to do. And I started looking for answers in places I had never looked before. I looked for the answer to what do you do about evil? Because a world that's dying is an evil thing. People stalking other people is an evil thing. Cancer in an epidemic phase is an evil thing. So I started reading in different places than I ever have. I'm a voracious reader. But none of the medical books that I had, none of the science books, and I love science, had anything to say about evil. Evil is not a scientific concept. Evil is a spiritual concept. There is no other way to grapple with it. It defies logical explanation. So I went reading in places I'd never read before, and I, for the first time, began to read some sacred text. I read some epic Hindu poems to begin with. I read the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, and I read through whatever I could get my hands on, philosophy, that sort of thing, looking for truths. I found a lot of beautiful things, beautiful truths, but for me, at least, no answer to what do you do about a world that's dying. I went to the emergency department to work one day, and it was a Sunday morning, which if you want to get seen quickly in the emergency department, go on Sunday morning, because it's the slowest day of the week. It's empty. Oddly, I didn't have anything to read. And I have to have something to read. And so I went out to the waiting room looking for something, and there were the usual People magazines and that sort of thing. And there on a coffee table was an orange book. And I picked it up, and I knew it was a Bible, and I kind of looked it over, and I said, I've never read this at all. And we don't have one at home. And it's pretty thick, and I don't want to start reading something that I can't finish. So I stole it. And I took it home, and this was a Bible with Hebrew scriptures in it and what's called New Testament. And I started reading in the New Testament because the New Testament begins with a book called Matthew, and being the egotist that I am, I wanted to see what the book that was named after me had to say. And my eyes were opened, and I met what I found to be the answer for me of what do you do about a world that's dying, and that was the character of Christ. It's interesting that I found what to do about a world that's dying. And I didn't have to read far into the book of Matthew. By chapter 7, I was seeing the answer. Chapter 7 is a joke by a carpenter. Jesus is instructing people about how not to be hypocrites. And he says that when it comes to the problems that we see in the world, what we want to do is straighten other people out first, while ignoring our own shortcomings. And I would ask you to think about environmental things in particular. We all can point to something or someone or somebody who we think really needs to be straightened out, environmentally speaking, and we ignore ourselves in that equation. And Jesus put this, that we always want to get a speck of sawdust out of somebody else's eye, and meanwhile there's a 2x4 in our own. I got the carpentry joke. And he says, fool hypocrite, why don't you get the log out of your own eye, and then maybe you'll be given the authority to be able to talk to others and to help them. Now what's interesting is that I already knew about this piece of scripture from its rewrite. This is the only piece of scripture that I know of, Old or New Testament, which was rewritten by somebody who was neither Jewish nor Christian and is better known than the original. Does anybody know who rewrote it and what it is? Mahatma Gandhi read this and said, this is how you change the world. You be the change that you want to see in the world. And he gives credit to this section out of the book of Matthew in his autobiography. And so I applied this to myself. I'm worried about the environment and the world dying. And this piece of scripture tells me that the first thing I'm supposed to worry about is me. So I went and did something called footprinting. Now in your sustainability merit badge handbook, right in the beginning, there's a picture of the earth with a footprint on it. And this comes from the concept that we all make a certain imprint by our lifestyle. And how many of you have ever done an environmental footprint? Raise your hand. So a fair number of you not only know what I'm talking about, but you've gone through this exercise. You add up the amount of energy you use, the resources that you buy, the trash that you make, etc., and you figure out what your impact is on the planet. I did this for our family, and I found out that we were dead average, 50th percentile for the United States. Fantastic, right? Because for our income level, we were doing great. It's easy to do this if you're in high school or in college and you're just living in your college dorm. You might come out okay on this. But we had a house and children and everything. And we were right at the 50th percentile, which meant we were actually working on our environmental impact. But I had a new boss in life, this person who didn't own any house, who didn't own a car because they weren't invented yet, but didn't even have a horse to ride on. The only time we know that he rode one, it was borrowed. It was a rent-a-horse or whatever. So I finally came back to my wife and I said, I know what we have to do about the world that's dying. We need to change our lifestyle. And I propose that we cut our impact to 1/10. That's the goal I'll set. We'll use 1/10 of the national average of fuel, and we'll make 1/10 the amount of trash, etc. And I think we're going to have to move from our house. And oh, by the way, I would like to quit my job because I think people really ought to work on this full time. Do you know what my wife said to me? God bless her. The only thing she said is, are you sure we have to do that much? So that's the process that we went through. It wasn't overnight, but we began to work on the energy, the trash. I haven't used a clothes dryer in 12 years. We only buy paper towels about once every 2 years because there's a couple of things that you got to do with paper towels. And we haven't figured out how to do that, but, etc. And we moved into a house that was the exact size of the garage of our former house. It's not very impressive. Have you ever seen a doctor's garage? I mean, this is not all that big a deal. And so we really dramatically began to change our lifestyle and way of living, and go through a learning curve, which now I forget about it even. I'm not very good at teaching it because I've been through it, and you just kind of forget about things. But spiritually, the big thing that happened is that my son, my wife, and my daughter all came to believe as I believed. And one of the things you do if you all believe in Christ, at least in the United States, is you go to church, right? And we started going to a church, and it was a Baptist church. And just to give you a kind of a sketch of what the church was like culturally, they did not belong to the Southern Baptist Convention because they thought if you got on that slippery slope of liberalism, it was world government next. So we don't have that many religious people here. You're not laughing. Or churchgoers or whatever. In other words, it was a pretty conservative church. It was a great church. I was taken to do medicine in Central America for the first time. My eyes were open to what a lot of the other world was dealing with. My eyes were open to what prisoners and their family in the United States were dealing with, because my church was across from a prison, and we had a lot of prisoners that would come and visit. So it was a great church. But when I offered to plant trees on the church ground, one of the people who worked there said to me that I had the theology of a tree hugger. This was not a compliment in our church. So I had this dilemma. Was my theology off? Or was it right? Where would I go to find the answer on this? Because my whole worldview had changed. Everything was changing. And I went and I read through Scripture. I started in Genesis and I read to Revelation, and I underlined everything. Why in orange pencil? I have no idea. It should have been green. But I underlined in orange everything that the Bible had to say with God revealing himself through nature, tasking us with caring for it, etc. How many of you have ever had a sermon on trees in the Bible? Raise your hand. Wow. 4? This is a densely educated green crowd, but it self-selects for that, obviously. A tree is the most mentioned living thing in the Bible other than humans. It's the first living thing made. Genesis 1, God makes trees before any other living thing. It's the first aesthetic assigned in the Bible. You think trees look pretty? According to the Bible, it's God's eye candy. Just likes the looks of them. And every important theologic concept is presented in trees. The tree of life is there. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is there. Now, the Bible doesn't tell history the way other books do. We don't know whether Abraham was short or tall. I don't know so many of the features and the characteristics, and I don't know whether he texted or Facebooked or anything like this, okay? But I know the exact species of tree that Abraham was sitting under when the angels came along. I know the species of tree that he planted. I know the species of tree that announced the all clear to Noah. I know the species of tree that Deborah held court under. The first psalm is probably to me a clarion call to how to age. And the first psalm says that to age well, you have to be like a tree planted by the water. And that water of life makes it so you can bear fruit all of your life. I can't think of a Bible character that isn't associated with a tree. And by the way, a bush is a tree, okay? And God bends low on bushes to talk directly to folks in the Bible. That's a pattern, whether it's Moses or Elijah or Jonah. And there's a pattern with these trees, and there's a code with them that runs throughout Scripture. Now, for Christians, the key event happens in the New Testament of the Bible. And Jesus comes along, and Jesus is born and put in a manger. I don't know whether that was wood or not. I like to think that it was. And so here, the Lion of Judah lays down, and the first thing to visit him are the lambs. So this fulfillment of a prophecy is coming along. And 2 out of the 3 gifts that are presented to him at his birth are made from trees. It's no accident here. This is going on and on and on. And this tree theme really gets elegant here in surrounding Christ. Remember, what's the first tree that's named in the Bible? Species that we have? It's the fig tree, right? It's how we hid from the Lord. And Jesus comes along and calls one of his disciples from under that fig tree. And it's this kind of back and forth. How do you know who I am? And there's this revelation by the person he's called and by him that they're going to serve each other. And it's as if Jesus is saying, you humans have been hiding behind these trees and behind these fig leaves for a long time. You can't hide from me there. And Jesus' language is so organic. It's amazing. I mean organic as in organic chemistry. To understand how unique it is, you have to look at the other people writing him around him in time. And every analogy and metaphor that he gives about these trees and everything holds up over time. You need to read some of the other writings in order to understand how unique it is. So Jesus comes along. He's brought up in a carpenter's home, we're told, and he goes about his ministry. One of the interesting things is at the end of his ministry, one of the last and oddest things he does is he destroys a fig tree. Anybody familiar with that? And a lot of people say, what is he doing there? That fig tree was bad to begin with, and that just fig leaves, because it has no fruit on it, he blasts away. And so it's all part of this grand scheme. Anyways, Jesus, as you know, dies on a tree. There's no other way to kill Jesus if you read through all of Scripture. In Isaiah, it says the Messiah will be like a little green tree. There's no other way to kill him. He's like Superman. The only way he killed Superman is with what? Kryptonite, piece of dirt. It's his own home thing, and it's the same is true for Christ. And Christ is put in the tomb, and 3 days later, Mary goes down, and eyes are red, and she sees Christ. She doesn't recognize him. Does anybody know what she mistakes him for? A gardener. Yes, this is no mistake. This is part of the story. He's the new Adam who's come to remove this curse, to take the thorns that the ground grew up from pollution literally into his skin. And so this is the God I serve who did everything on trees. So, end of story. To be a tree hugger is a good thing. Just telling this kind of story and working with it has allowed me and our organization to inspire people of faith, the Christian faith, to become better stewards. everything from one of the seminaries I work with. It's the 6th largest seminary in the United States. I was told that I would never have any impact or inroads there. But when they just built $50 million worth of student houses, they took not one dump truck of dirt on or off that property in order to be good stewards. They recycled the buildings they took down. It's geothermal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is my encouragement to you, that many, many people are motivated through their faith, whether that's Jewish or Muslim or Christian, or Hindu. They're motivated through their faith, and the one area that environment has failed to connect with is people's faith. And an encouragement that whatever that faith is that you're dealing with your students, to connect with it. And I really appreciate you having me here, John, and it was a pleasure to fly here knowing that I would be with so many great people, and it's proved to be the case. So thank you.